Hello, Garland here, and here we are just before the new year, and all kinds of weird things going on. And nothing I enjoy talking about more than systemic issues, right? People get caught up in this guy or that guy, the bad party, the good party. I had a caller Friday night on my radio show in DC, and the guy was, oh, I agree with you on this and that. But then he went on to say, but the Republicans, the Republicans, the Republicans. So it's kind of like people who can see that there's a problem, but they're still stuck in, but it's one of these parties. Things would be much better if it wasn't for one of these parties. And now when I talk to them about the U.S. Imperial globalist or neocon or neoliberal or whatever term you want to talk about foreign policy and how evil it is, he agreed. But he kept coming back to, but the Republicans, right? So let's talk about what's going on here, right? First, the first point I have to make is, if you look at the problem, the depth of the problems we're dealing with, any one of these issues, economic or political or militarily, individually, would be bad news, would be a lot of problems. But collectively, they're catastrophic, cataclysmic, right? Look at what's happening right now in the car market. You've got in pickup trucks in the United States, which a lot of people drive pickup trucks, 80, 90, 100,000. People can't afford them. The lots are lined up with them. Cars everywhere, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 for cars. 1 out of every 5 car loan applications in the United States is denied. The average car payment, I think, is $560 or something in the US, right? Bottom line is people can't afford to buy new cars. People can't afford to buy new houses. What do you have when you get to the point where the normal things that people use in life to exist, to go to work, to live, are now out of reach of the populace? We have a system now that produces things, goods and services, right? Everything's a good or a service or a financial tool. And one of the things that this system does is screws over the workers. They want labor as cheap as possible. We want cheap labor. And then we'll make a massive profit. And we won't lower the price. We'll continue to raise the price of what we're selling. We won't lower the price. But what we'll do is we'll really make labor take a beating. Labor's got to take a haircut, as they say, right? But it's a system where that labor that takes a haircut is makes up the the purchasing power of the system. So you're literally economically disadvantaging the people in the system that economically prop up the system. And it works temporarily, but at some point you start to see what you're getting now. So when we talk about, I use the term neoliberalism, right? Briefly, you've probably heard me do this before, but I'll talk a little, just very briefly. Neoliberalism is what, in my opinion, I would just label it a self-serving racket. And the racket kind of works like this. If we give more money to the wealthy, everybody will be better off. Number one. Number two, everything should be done for maximum profit. Every business should be for maximum profit. Every person should try to make as much money as they possibly can. There is some inherent flaws in that, because there are things in life, there are services that people need in life, there are certain things that people need in life that are basic necessities to survive, that if they are not there, you can't have a stable society. If those things are made for maximum profit, at some point, just like cars and trucks, they will be priced out of the realm, the economic realm of the masses, which means now the basics that people need, they can't get. At that point, you get unrest. At that point, when people can no longer afford the basics, you get unrest. And that's kind of where we are. But there are a number of other things going on here. The foundation of neoliberalism is the self-serving racket. Give everything to the rich. Now, you can do that in various ways. There's a myriad of ways that you can give everything to the rich, that you can give more to you can take from the working class, take from the poor and give it to the rich. There's numerous ways to do it. But the foundation of it is You can't tell the American people that you're acting in a way that is detrimental to them. So you have to continue to lie to them. As the economic system continues to deteriorate, you have to continue to lie to them as to why. You have to constantly find scapegoats. It is the Russians, it is the immigrants, it is the whoever you can find, right? You'll always find someone whose fault it was. In the United States, in the beginning of neoliberalism, as the situation began to deteriorate, and people in the US will remember this, here's what they used to say: it's welfare, all throughout the 80s. I had people say to me, if only they get rid of welfare, then we'd be fine. Economy will be fine. And Bill Clinton pretty much got rid of welfare, right? Things kept spinning out of control. Why? Because it was convenient. And who was it? The poorest people in the society were the people on welfare. Now, you can argue whether it was good, bad, or indifferent. I got a lot of thoughts on that. But my point being this was, the idea at the time was that welfare was the fix. Get rid of it. That's what's costing us all this money. Well, welfare at that point was less than 1% of the budget. And I used to say that to people. It's less than 1% of the federal budget. Really? You think that's the fix? The fix is less for the poor. Not again, we could talk about whether it's good, bad, or different. The issue was the idea that fixing welfare, that all we have to do is deal with the poorest people of this country and that'll fix the problems, was absurd. And that we can restore less than 1% of the budget. That's going to, well, here's the bottom line. They pretty much did away with welfare. There are still people that believe that we have it, right? But I guess they can't let go of that concept, or whatever, that's the fault. But now it's immigrants. They're the poorest people. If we just get rid of them, all the good jobs will come back because everybody wants to go out there and cut grass and pick grapes. There is certainly Putin. It's his fault. Remember this, the Putin, what they call it, the Putin inflation or the Putin something or other. When inflation was going up, they started by saying it's transitory. And then when it was obvious it wasn't, they blamed it on Putin, right? So now it's his fault. It's immigrants' fault. It's always somebody who's not here in this country or very, very poor. It's their fault. The one thing in neoliberalism you can never do is look to the wealthy and the rich and the corporations for potential issues that may be causing us economic instability. Never, ever, ever in neoliberalism, you always look to the poor. Why? Because the solution in neoliberalism is always to take more from the poor and give it to the rich. Keep in mind something. If you cut any program that goes to the poor, that money's going to go somewhere. Now, if you start looking around at the big banks and the big corporations, you'd be surprised how many companies they buy that have government contracts. Elon Musk, he's got huge government contracts. Why? Because all the billionaires, Microsoft, Amazon, all of the billionaires, because a big part of becoming one of the oligarchs is getting the money from the government. Amazon has $600 million contract with the CIA for store. You think that's the only contract they have? There was a fight a while back, an argument between what was it? It was between Musk's company and Microsoft, and to get a $10 billion contract. Musk's company, whichever company it was, got the $10 billion contract. Microsoft was mad. Congress then went in and rewrote a new $10 billion contract and gave it to them. So everybody got it. So when you start understanding that these so-called oligarchs that are so brilliant and they're, economic geniuses, and that's how they made their money, you'll find oftentimes it was playing the stock market. It was buying companies and rolling them over as financial tools and huge government contracts. The people who tell us, get the government off my back, part of neoliberalism, right? The government creates corporations. It creates regulations and rules. It creates limited liability. It creates all of these things. How about this? Patent office to protect things that corporations invent. So the government creates corporations, protects the liability of the corporate officers, and protects the patent rights and the inventions of the corporations. And then so all of these are government rules and regulations. You can't steal this from a corporation. You can't infringe upon their patent. You can't do this and that, right? They're protected. You can't sue the corporate officers. They're protected from liability, limited LLC, limited liability corporation, right? The government does all of that. And when the government finishes creating the corporation, protecting the corporation, doing everything to make sure that you can't do anything to hurt the corporation or the owners of the corporation then say, we want less regulations and get the government off of our back. That's weird. They don't want the government off their back. They wouldn't be there if it wasn't for the government. The government created corporations. The government gave them all the rights, and the government protects them from liability and protects their patents, and yet they want the government off their back. No, they don't really want the government off their back. They want you off their back. So if you say to members of your government, hey, corporation so-and-so is doing this, I want you to stop them from doing that because they're pouring methyl ethyl horrible into this creek next to my house. They want to say we need to get rid of those regulations that says I can't pour methyl ethyl horrible into the creek. So ultimately, what do? They buy the corporations eventually buy the politicians, and that's a huge part of the collapse that we're in now. It's inevitable that as you concentrate the money into the hands of a few, those few are going to have more and more money, and they're going to use that money to basically buy the government and control the government. And that's where we are. If you look at what Trump does, he'll do the same thing that Biden did. He'll do the same thing that Obama did. If it's some government regulatory agency that regulates pipelines, he'll bring somebody in who worked for a lobbying company that lobbied on behalf of the corporations when it comes to pipelines or mining or whatever. All they do is they bring in a person who has worked on behalf of the corporations to now work for the government to address the regulations on that particular issue. And guess what? The corporations own the government. They own the members of Congress. They own the White House. And they then tell them, this is who I want you to put in this position, my guy. And he still got stock in my company. And he goes. So now what you have now is exactly what we have: a corporate government, a corporatist government. And a government is at least supposed to pretend that they're looking out for you. They don't do that anymore. They stop pretending. And so now the people, I mean, let's face it, it's not hard to figure out. The economic crash is here. And when I say economic crash, I don't mean the economic crash like you fall off a cliff and you hit the ground, a sudden one. I mean, it's sudden in the context of time. You know what I mean? Over a course of a 5 or 10 year period. If you say on the context of time, starting at say 2008 as the foundation of the crash, that's when the foundation of the neoliberal ideology kind of fell apart. And the foundation of it in our society is financialization. What is that? Everything is nothing is worth, I'll put it like this: everything is simply about money. It's all about money. Nothing else. A company that produces widgets, right? So I got a company and I'm pretty good at producing these widgets and everybody likes my widget. What happens? A big corporation comes in and says, you're making a lot of money. How much, Garland, how much is your company worth? It's worth $3 billion. We'll give you 6. Okay, I sell my company. They got it. Now, they didn't buy that company to make widgets. This is a company that makes widgets. And see, this is what's happening. And this is why people don't realize the services they're getting are so bad. And the things that they're buying, the hardware they're buying is so bad. Because the person that bought that company bought the company as a financial tool. So when that company builds widgets, you want a good widget. They buy that company, and then they say, how can we save money? They lay people off, they cut back on the types of materials they're using to build a widget. So what you have is an inferior widget made by uneducated, not good poor workers who are paid, very little or nothing. So they're not motivated to work hard. So, and what do? They raise the price of the widgets. So you're paying more, and you're getting an inferior product, and the people that are making it aren't even happy. And you're not happy as an end user, but they don't care because they didn't buy that company to make widgets. They bought that company to roll it over. They bought that company because that widget company is strong and it can borrow money. What do? They come in, they take a gigantic loan out against the widget company. They know in 4 or 5 years that widget company is going to go bankrupt. That's what they bought it for. They take out loans, they put them in their pockets. They use that widget company as a money laundering company. And meanwhile, you as the consumer need widgets, something you need. Well, guess what? You don't have the opportunity to get a decent widget at a decent price anymore. And that is what's going on all over our country. They're making maximum. They've gone from we're going to make maximum profit to we're going to continue to make even more profit. And we're going to charge you a fortune for it. Think about it. If your Jeep Stellantis, right? You're saying, well, wait a minute. I'm selling Jeeps for $30,000. If I sell them for 60 some, I'll make twice as much. I'm selling them for 60 some. Makes sense. I mean, a purely the bean counters perspective, if you sell them for twice as much, you'll get twice as much. And when people say that ain't a good idea, what's the land to say? We're going for a new market. We're going for the more wealthy people. Well, first of all, you cut your employees, you cut labor, you did everything you could to make a cheaper product, which you did. So you make an inferior product and you double, and 40 to 60%. That's how much the prices are increased in the Dodge and Jeep family. They're going to go out of business because they priced themselves out of the market. But that's the direction that neoliberalism goes. There's no way, there's nobody there putting the brakes on. There's no ideological fence that says, hey, we're going a little too far, buddy. We'll get ready to crash everything. Nope, 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 nope. Now, here's the thing about neoliberalism, this self-serving racket. Two things ultimately happen. And that is the corporate elite, the ruling elite, completely take over the government to the point where they don't even care anymore if you know it. They don't, if you, the perfect example right now, to be quite honest, is the Democratic Party. The Republican Party, don't get me wrong, I'm not for it. I oppose both of them. I'm just saying, you got to look at the Republican Party and say, the leaders of the party didn't want Trump, but the people of the party wanted him, so they got him. Now, don't get me wrong. I'll go tell you that Trump's a neoliberal and he was neoliberal on steroids and he will be again. I'm just saying from the perspective of democracy, just that perspective, for what little that we have, which we don't really, the Democratic Party is the ultimate neoliberal party. And they can't even pretend anymore to practice democracy. They can't even pretend. This is ultimately where you get with neoliberalism. That's why I say the Republican Party is crap, don't get me wrong, but the Democratic Party is the model to look at if you want to understand where neoliberalism goes, the ultimate expression of neoliberalism, right? And now they're facing a reckoning all throughout. And it is a fast, again, in the context of time, say 10 years, 20 years, 15 years, 5 years, 30 years, 100 years. This is very fast. And so the Democratic Party, if you look at it, is reflected that the neoliberal, whatever I want to call it, image of the Democratic Party is reflected all throughout the U.S. vassals. And I mean, think about it. Is this an accident? If you look at the United States, you got the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Now, the Republican Party is now the party of Trump to some extent, but it's also the ideology is founded in neoliberalism. So, but you got two parties and, you can choose between the two, right? But this year there was more of a choice than there has been. Not that either one of them is good, but there was more of a choice than there have been because the Democratic Party has become such a pure expression of neoliberalism, right? But, okay, here you got the Democrats and the Republicans, as people say, you got a left and a right leg. The left and the right leg are walking in the same direction. But you go the Tories and Labor. How's that working out? Same exact dynamic. Let's go to Germany. They're about to have an election. A lot of people look at it and they're like, we're going to get this, CDU guy who is even more pro, neoliberal and neocon than the one-eyed pirate Schultz. Again, what did they do? The neoliberal setup. If the corporations and the ruling elite own the entire government, if they've taken over the entire government, then what difference does it make which party wins? The current iteration of the government, they own both parties, and you just choose one for a little while to humor yourself. In the US, in the UK, on and on and on. And what happens in France? Even when they kind of lose, Macron just says, yeah, screw that. Never mind. Let's keep doing what we're doing. So neoliberalism ultimately negates politics. It negates any pretense of democracy, of a government that responds in any way to the working class. And what you end up with is an openly fascist, openly elitist government that just simply says we do what we want, and our job is to look for more ways to shut you up, more ways for censorship. Right? They got to censor because they can't afford the kind of conversations that are going on now. So a big part of one couldn't even argue the foundation of neoliberalism is censorship and propaganda now. It is, look, if I'm going to sell you something that is going to kill you. If I'm going to sell you something that's going to destroy your way of life, if I'm going to sell you something, an ideology, a product, whatever, that's going to make your life miserable, I got to convince you that's the opposite, right? I got to say, oh, just take one of these a day and you'll be healthy, and it'll cure ED, diabetes, hair loss, you name it, everything. You take this. I can't tell you if you take this, it's going to make you sick and kill you, even though I know that, but it's going to enrich me. No. And that is the foundation of neoliberalism. They have to convince you and I've got to give them credit. They've been good at it, because they convinced a lot of people in the West of preposterous absurdities, right? That, oh, this is a meritocracy. The cream rises to the top. Not that it's totally fixed, completely fixed. The only thing that rises to the top is your money. It goes to the rich people. The only thing that rises to the top is the political and economic power. That rises to the top. But they've done really, really good job of convincing people. So the propaganda was great and worked very, very well for a long, long time as neoliberalism manifested itself. And slowly, the people couldn't really pick up that their economic viability of the system that they're in had deteriorated to the point where they were locked in a life and death economic struggle. They couldn't pick that up because of all the propaganda. But here's the next problem. At some point, I believe all of this, what's going on now, this whole reckoning, is about the deterioration of the economic circumstances of the common man and woman. Because what we're looking at now is the situation wherein they didn't know, the old boiling frog, it gets hotter and hotter and hotter, and the frog doesn't know until he's boiled alive. Well, it's getting hot enough now that the people are getting uncomfortable economically. They're starting to feel the pain. Right. And really feel the pain. And people who, quote, did everything right. In other words, did what they were told to do. You do this, go to school, do that, come out, get student loans. You'll be up to your ears in debt for the rest of your lives, and then shut up and you'll do well. And now they can do everything they're supposed to do. Everything they were told would work in the system, and they're still stuck in a life of student loans and hellified misery, working at Pizza Hut, making pizzas besides some guy who's in way better shape than you, because the difference is he's only got a high school education and he doesn't have to pay student loans. And now you're asking yourself, why did I go through all of this stuff only to find out that the system itself doesn't work for me? When you do everything right and you're worse off than the person who doesn't work to get ahead, then you're in the same circumstances that person is, except you've made some investments to do it and he hasn't, and you get the same thing less than he does. People get pissed. And so what we have now is, what's going on now is the backlash. And the economic backlash is also the political backlash. They're one and the same. So because people are suffering, let me add this. Because people are suffering, they're getting angry and they're starting to push back, and they're starting to question the tropes of the ruling elite. One of the things that I bring up is boating, that I saw it with my own eyes, right? I've been around boating for years, my whole life. My dad had a boat when I was a kid, right? Always been fishing. And I recall, man, you go out on the Chesapeake Bay, dude. There was a lot of fishermen out there. There were boats just putting around, families all the time. Lots of people would get a boat and a boat and motor and trailer. They get a runabout. They get all kinds of different boats, right? And they'd be out there on the weekends just having a blast. Or during the week, there was boats everywhere. You go out on the 4th of July, with holiday weekend, you can walk across the bay, but boats everywhere, right? And I noticed, you can drive across the Bay Bridge, boats everywhere. And I noticed over the course of the years, fewer and fewer boats, until it gets to the point you go out there, man, there ain't that much going on out there. Not a lot of boats. Why? Because people can't afford it. People can't afford a boat. A boat is a luxury. And might I add, boats were a lot less expensive then, just like cars, right? You could buy a pickup truck. A working person could buy a pickup truck and a boat. It wasn't hard. And this was a man who had a wife and 2.5 kids. He had a pickup truck. His wife had a car. They both probably worked. They did okay, and they had a boat. And on the weekends, they got the kids, and they got all the stuff in coolers and drinks and things like that. And they piled everybody, drove down to Sandy Point State Park and backed the boat in and went out fishing and having fun. That's what they did. Not anymore. Not anymore. They're trying to keep the one car they got on the road because that's breaking down, and they don't know how they're going to pay their bills month to month. So a boat is out of the question. Leisure's gone. Those things are gone. Now the husband's working 2 jobs and the wife is too, and the kids are on fentanyl. The crime, the crimes of desperation and despair. And those people are not going to be comfortable just voting the same old party that they voted that got them there. And might I add, the other part of neoliberalism is you've got that's expressing itself is you've got a ruling elite who have globalists, that's the term people used to use, international aspirations, right? They want to run the world, and most importantly, they want to get cheap natural resources so they can keep their corporations rolling and keep their profits rolling, right? They still got their eye on that, and that requires war, regime change, all kinds of terrible things. Again, they got to feed you with the propaganda. Otherwise, you would ask questions, which people are starting to do, number one. And number two, as people start to struggle more and more and more, they ask more and more questions and they challenge more and more. And what happens then? Now that requires censorship. You can't allow them to think for themselves. But once they start thinking for themselves, they're going to start talking. And once they start talking, you got to shut their filthy little stinking mouths and say, look, who do you think you are on Twitter or Facebook or YouTube challenging what the ruling elite's telling you? I mean, I'm on YouTube. You know what? YouTube's job is to challenge you, is to stop you from challenging the ruling elites of tropes, the ruling elites' plans, the ruling elites' propaganda, as is Facebook and TikTok, you name it, all of them. Their job now is to, I'll put it like this. Here's a personal example. I remember a while back when Tucker Carlson talked to President Putin. And afterwards, what was the big criticism in the U.S. media of Tucker? He didn't challenge him on fill in the blank. When Putin said this, how come you didn't challenge him on that? When he said this. So what they're saying is this: as the media, the ruling elite, the intelligence agencies, the State Department has come up with certain things we are to believe about Putin and Russia. So if you ask President Putin a question and he answers it, and that is not aligned with what we are supposed to believe. President Putin said things that are not aligned with the State Department, the intelligence agencies, and their puppets in the media, right? President Putin said something that wasn't aligned with that. They've already told us fill in the blank. They told us this. President Putin said that. That doesn't align with what the propaganda we're supposed to believe. And what did they say? Well, how come Tucker Carlson didn't challenge them? In other words, we are the gatekeepers of this propaganda. When you talk to Putin, they told us that Putin likes to eat puppies. If President Putin says, no, I don't like to eat puppies, you're supposed to say, yes, you are. Why? Because that's part of the propaganda. That's the foundation of what we're supposed to believe in. And your job, brother, as a member of the media, is to guard that with your life, to guard that propaganda and to enforce, even to the president of another country, the propaganda in the United States. So when President Putin says, nah, I don't like to eat puppies, that's crazy. I got a bunch of dogs myself, love dogs. You're supposed to say, you liar. Not for him. He already knows he's telling the truth. It's so that when the people back here hear what President Putin said, they will have a protector of propaganda to say, okay, don't believe that. But remember, the ruling elite here has told us X, you got to believe X. Problem is this, again, what's happening? And this is important. And when I say the holistic crash, the foundation of that propaganda has become the mainstream media, right? The mainstream media, they're the ones that tell us Kamala's going to win, Hillary's going to win. They're the one that tells us, whatever it is you choose, they choose to have you believe. They're the ones to tell you that and to enforce that afterwards, right? And what's going on? Mainstream media is in collapse. That's part of the neoliberal crash because they are a foundation of neoliberal propaganda. They are the high prophets of neoliberalism that gives you the message. You know how back in the medieval days and some of the dark periods of Europe, I could argue we're still in the dark period of Europe the way things are going, but one of the things that happened was there were only preachers were the only, the priests were the only ones allowed to read, and they would read the Bible, and no one else could read the Bible to you. That would be blasphemy if somebody else read the Bible, right? Only certain people were allowed to know things. They were supposed to control what was believed about the Bible. If you come out, God forbid, and said something like, perhaps all the planets don't revolve around the earth. Maybe we all revolve around the sun. Then their job was to say you're a heretic and you'll be burned to death. And you were to say, then again, I think I'm probably wrong as a scientist. Yeah, they all revolve around us. They were there. The priests were there to protect the argument that all knowledge was revealed by God. And if you push back against something we already believed, you got to get burned alive. Okay, that's what the media is now. That's their job, to protect the media. All information is revealed by God, which in this instance is the government of the United States. And their job is, if you say, I don't agree with it, their job is to come after you and try to destroy you, try to discredit you, do anything they can, but they got to protect that message. That's what they're paid to do. And the fact that what is it? CNN and MSNBC are losing like 47, 46, 40 some percent of their audience. One of them 47%. I don't know about the other. They're both in the 40s. That's not a strategy that works from a business perspective, but even worse, because from a business perspective, they can get by that. Look, Jeff Bezos didn't pay $200 million for the Washington Post to make money. He did that because the Washington Post is the, quote, paper of record. And that's a great propaganda machine for the ruling elite. And he's certainly a member of the ruling elite, right? So they're okay if they don't make money. They're fine. They're going to make their money. It just won't be through that, right? But the problem is nobody's listening to them because they're suffering. They're saying to people in an election, when people say, look, man, I'm not doing so well. The economy's bad. Their job is to say, yes, I know it seems like the economy's bad. But go to our website here. It's www.voteforkamalaharris.com. And you'll find pie charts and graphs. And all you have to do is watch them, look at them, and you'll find out that you're doing great. That's their job. Don't blame them for it. Don't get mad at them. That's their job. I don't care how bad things are you're doing. Their job is to tell you it's doing great. But people are rolling to them now. Why? Because they're suffering. Because you can't tell a man or woman, you can't tell them if they're looking at their asset liability sheet, right? And it's like, well, let's see, I owe $4,000 this month. I'm only going to make $3,000. Uh-oh, I got a problem. It does no good to tell that person that the economy's great and they're doing fine. Now, as I said, they went for Trump. Trump's going to be some problem. If they let him even live to get in, there'll be some problems for them in some ways. But one of the things that's hilarious to me is he's about to abuse the hell out of Europe. He said to Europe, you got to buy more energy from us, more gas and oil from us, more. Why? Well, we're only going to charge you 4 to 7 times more than the Russians, but that's not important now. You have to do what you're told. That's what Trump, if the Europeans think he's coming in to save them, buddy, he ain't the cure, he's the disease. Trump is Mr. Neoliberal extraordinaire, except he doesn't have the filter. He's not going to go to the Europeans and say, look, we're selling you this stuff to make you safer. He's going to say, shut up and give us your money. He's a stick-up artist. Trump's more the stick-up artist type. Biden and those guys, they're just lying, warmongering criminals. They're going to be like, look, do it because we must save you from the Russians. And if you buy energy from the Russians, they'll do you dirty and stuff like that. So buy it from us at 5 times as more, right? Trump is just going to say, put your hands up. Don't turn around at all. Put your hands up. Now, give me your money, your wallet, give me your rings, give me everything. He's a stick-up artist. At least he's more honest. He's sticking Europe up. He's going to make it harder for the ruling elite in Europe. It's easy for them to explain away Putin's out to get you. Therefore, you're going to have to be impoverished. The entire continent is going to be impoverished to protect you from Putin, right? Hey, you're going to freeze to death because you can't afford energy, but at least Putin won't get the Donbass. They're going to do that kind of stuff, right? Okay, they've got an absurd argument, but at least they got an argument. Trump, stick him up, bro. Give me your money. That's what Trump's going to do, which to some extent I'm glad, because let's face it, it's a lot easier to wake people up and to communicate to people that they're being had if the person that's hadding them is sticking a gun in their face and saying, put your hands up, cough it all up. That's what they're going to get now. They're going to get a more blunt form of neoliberalism from Trump. But And the Brits are like, hey, we'll go with Nigel Farage. Well, okay, fine, go with Nigel Farage. Now, ultimately, they'll get some things where Farage will say, hey, I don't want this war. I don't want it. If he were to get in, which the system will be at war with him, trying to stop him. And the king will probably beat him to death himself. We'll go, tell him to look the other way and hit him over the head with something. But let's just say he got in charge. What's he going to do? He's going to blame it on the immigrants. Just the problem is all these immigrants, which the wealthy ruling elite love immigrants. But they ain't going to really do nothing about that. And of course, he ain't anti-neoliberal. He's not going to say, we're financializing everything. We've got an economic system that basically takes all the money from the poor and gives it to the rich. That probably ain't a good idea. Perhaps we should. No, he ain't going to do that. He's going to be down with that. Or whoever they get in charge is still, they may be opposed to a lot of things, but they ain't going to be opposed to more tax cuts for the rich and increases tax for you. They'll increase your taxes. They'll increase the economic burden on the working class. And of course, the wealthy will get the great benefits from that. Trump's going to come in. You know what he's bringing in. Come on, the richest guy in the world. So the richest guy in the world, Doge, right? Department of Government, whatever it is, efficiency. The richest guy in the world is going to say, I'm going to look at the government and see how it works better for me. You think Elon Musk is going to say, yes, we've got to be concerned about all these workers here. We can't just screw them over. No, I don't think that's going to be the direction he's going to go. So you're going to get another, how can we screw the little guy? Now, Trump has some interesting ideas and concepts that he's going to go, but none of them involve questioning the foundation of neoliberalism. For instance, the foreign policy of neoliberalism is about two things. Domestically lying and propagandizing your people to tell them that you're going out and you're robbing other people for good reason, right? You're Robin Hood, basically. The U.S. Government tries to argue that they're Robin Hood. We're going out and we're committing crimes for good reasons, right? What are you overthrowing this country? Well, yeah, we need to overthrow this country. Why? Because the leader is evil and bad to its people, and he's a dictator, and he's authoritarian, and he has a bad ideology and all these things. So we've got to do something terrible, which is overthrow his country. But we're doing it for good reasons. So really, it's good to overthrow his country. So you have to lie constantly about regime change. It is about why you're doing it, lie at home. And then here's the really extra nasty, it's all nasty. The extra nasty part about neoliberalism is this. The ruling elite are going to, let's say, Venezuela, rob Venezuela for their oil. They're going to tell you how bad Maduro is. They're going to overthrow the government, if they can do it, and steal all the oil. That would be the plan, right? But you ain't even going to benefit. Here you are back in the empire, and you're like, oh, well, they're going to go steal stuff. At least I'll get a piece. Sorry, you ain't getting none of it. They're going to do that. They'll steal all the oil from Venezuela. They'll take all the profit, and they won't even bring it back here. It'll be like in the Isle of Man or some island that used to be owned by the British Crown and actually still really is, but we're supposed to think it isn't. And what do they do with like the Isle of Man and these former British colonies? They put puppets in charge. Then they pass these laws that there's basically no financial rules or regulations in any way. Any corporation there doesn't pay taxes. Any corporation there has no, doesn't have to tell them anything, doesn't have to share any information for the government. And like Apple and all of these countries moved to some island, their headquarters is some island with like 100 people. Why? Because they don't have to abide by any rules and laws. So let me put it to you like this. When Apple and these other countries moved to some island in the Pacific, in 1,000 miles from nowhere, that's where their headquarters is. That's where all their profit goes, where they don't have to pay any taxes or anything like that, right? What they're doing, it's the same thing as when they close a factory in Indiana and move that factory to where the hell ever, Bangladesh, where they can pay people a couple dollars a day. I'm just throwing the word. It could be any country, not necessarily Bangladesh, right? What do? I'm going to take that productive economic this plant, this entity, right? It is a gigantic factory. It makes things, it employs people, it buys products and stuff, and it does stuff that it needs inputs like plastic or metal or whatever to be shipped in there. So I pay the shippers, and everybody's making money off of this factory running. But I can move this factory to another company, pay everything cheaper, make more money. I'm going to do that. And I'm going to hurt the United States at home because who cares? And I'm just going to keep the money flowing around in the shell companies. It isn't going to help this island that I've moved to. And it ain't sure as hell ain't going to help the country that I've opened a new sweatshop in, right? Child labor, everything else. When Apple or whoever moves their headquarters to some godforsaken island the size of a Olympic swimming pool in the middle of nowhere because it has no economic regulations, it's the same thing. They're taking productive capital out of the U.S. economy and they're moving it to an island, and then it just dissipates anywhere from there. Bottom line is this: everything they do. Let me put it another way. Neoliberalism doesn't have a home country. So the neoliberals have no reason to say, I want the United States to be wealthy, prosperous, stable. They don't need that anymore. They're not here. Their headquarters isn't here. Their factory isn't here. They don't pay any workers here. Once they make the money, they dissipate the money into shell companies all over the world. That's not here. They have no stake in keeping the United States if they're Americans, or the UK if they're British. They have no stake in maintaining a civil, industrial, strong society in these countries. They're not here anymore. They got no stake. In their means of production are gone. Their profits end up in their pockets on the Isle of whatever the hell in the middle of the Pacific. They don't care about you anymore. You are now, when they would go to some African country that has diamonds and they would immiserate everybody in the country and use kids to crawl into little holes in the ground to get diamonds until those holes collapse on some of the kids and then they get some more. When they did that, they impoverished and just abused these countries to get all of their natural resources. And they were highly unstable and political unstable. And they would put puppets in charge in that country to get their stuff. But they would try to keep the US or the UK or Germany stable because that was their home country. Well, guess what, guys? Neoliberal now says you're that little African kid that crawls into a hole for diamonds. They have no more stake in keeping your country stable, your people fed, or anything else. They have no more stake in that than they do in the little African country that they immiserated, impoverished, and robbed blind. They treat you the same. The monster that we created to go around the world and steal people's stuff and overthrow governments, guess what? That monster is feeding at home now. That neoliberal monster is feeding at home. It's feeding all throughout the U.S. empire. And now, guess what's happening? It's creating political instability because the people in these countries are accustomed to they have an expectation, right? Their expectation is, I live in the U.S. and then what have they been told? You're superior. You've got a superior work ethic. You've got a superior everything. You're superior. And so therefore, our system is superior. Therefore, you're going to live better than everybody else in the world. And you should, because you're superior. And now be thankful you were born in the United States or England or whatever, not in one of these other countries. You were born in a superior culture, a superior mindset. Economically, everything's good here and you're going to do well. And people are now saying, well, wait a minute. I'm living in a poor country now. I'm not getting any of this, whatever you're doing. And they look and it's like, wait a minute. The corporate profits are going through the roof. Why is it I'm not seeing any of that? You're not supposed to see any of that. It ain't for you. Right? So they're asking questions and it causes them not to believe the propaganda anymore. It causes them to now look in the mirror and ask themselves, why do I believe what these people are telling me? And bottom line, they don't. And the big thing that's going to crush neoliberalism, going to hurt neoliberalism so much is the loss of the propaganda machines. The fact that people are not watching the mainstream media anymore and they're going away from it. So here's what you have. Let's look at it. Let's look at this reckoning. Number one, the crash of institutions. The institutions, the pillars of neoliberalism, which include the government entities, right? Congress and the parliament, the makeup of our respective governments, right? That's going to hell. The institutions such as the media, that's fallen apart because people have figured them out and people don't believe them anymore. And the reason they don't believe them, and here's a perfect example why they don't believe them. They don't believe them because their asset and liability sheet says I owe $4,000 a month and I only make $3,000. But the media says to them, don't listen to these crazy Trumpers that tell you the economy's not good. Here's a pie chart. Here's a graph that shows the economy's great. Well, you know what? You're going to lose people when you tell them, when you, as they say, when you pee down their back and tell them it's raining. So I think that was a big one. Number two, the fact of the matter is that our politics have deteriorated into a clown show, right? Wherein the ruling elite don't even want somebody that appears to be competent anymore. They just want a pure puppet. I mean, look at the U.S. The U.S. is the chief of it. It's the Vatican of neoliberalism, right? And look at the U.S. Joe Biden, a guy who now they're like, here's what kills me. They're admitting that they knew all along what we knew. We're like, hey, Joe Biden, something wrong with that guy, man. He looks like he has dementia. No, this is the best Joe Biden ever. He's brilliant. He's smart. He's going to win. He's unstoppable. And then they put him out there and everybody looks at him and goes, holy crap, that guy looks like something's wrong with him. I think he's got dementia. And so finally they say, we were shocked by what we saw in this debate. So I guess we're going to have to replace him. Now, months later, they're like, it's coming out. Yeah, we knew he had dementia all the time. And we're like, so did we. Come on. Who'd you think you were fooling? Okay. You stuck this guy out there and they're like, well, he can't run for office. And we're like, well, but how's he going to continue to run the country? Or perhaps he's not running the country. So in the dynamic of a president being discredited to the point that he's mentally incapable of running a country, and they say we're still going to of running for office, and they say we're still going to keep him in office. You know, he ain't in power. He's in office. He's not in power. And so the cat was kind of let out of the bag. Meanwhile, they say we got to get rid of Joe Biden. All right, who are you going to go with? Kamala Harris. Let's face it. Let's be blunt here. She's a freaking idiot. We watched her and we're looking at her and she's some kind of a psychopath. She's insane. We're watching her and she's doesn't have the, she's just like Hillary, both sociopaths, doesn't have the ability to really properly express emotions, to communicate with people. So she just bursts out in laughter for no reason. You know, it was like everybody should laugh now, so I'll laugh now and show them how, and then they'll join me in laughing. Not, I don't really understand why people laugh and when they laugh. That would, she'd been honest. Hey, people aren't laughing. Yeah, but I'm a sociopath, so I don't understand what makes people laugh or what doesn't make them laugh. Can't really communicate with people that well, so I'll just burst out and laugh in weird and creepy laughter at inappropriate times. So they put her out there, and we got to listen to this idiot tell us over and over, yes, Americans have aspirations and dreams, and that's what's significant about the passage of time. And we're like, what the hell is she talking about? She's not even smart enough to lie properly. So we're looking at here and we're like, Schultz, Starmer, Truss, Macron, Trudeau, Biden. We're looking at these people and we're like, the ruling elite, really, they mock us. They put out these people out there and we're like, I wouldn't want that person to run a fast food restaurant. I wouldn't want him to watch my kids. I wouldn't want him to clean my house. I wouldn't trust him around sharp objects. And I'm supposed to believe that you guys were going to put Kamala Harris in charge? The cat's out of the bag. We know what time it is now. We know what's going on. So what we're looking at in neoliberalism is people have figured out that the government does not represent us, and that the government doesn't even want somebody competent so that that competent person may think about making decisions for themselves. They want a hollow-headed idiot who do whatever he's told. Now, I'm not saying Trump, I'm not promoting Donald Trump that he's different or good or bad. He's going to be Mr. Neoliberal, but he'll probably aggravate him in some areas, but I bet you this, he's probably going to aggravate his followers in a lot more areas. The promises that he made, yeah, good luck. If they aren't neoliberal promises, you ain't getting them. If they are, yeah, probably are. He'll do a couple things. How much he will investigate. Remember, Trump saying that Hillary, what did he say about her? He said, lock her up. And then as soon as he got in office, he was like, well, the Clintons have been through too much. He understands the game. He claims that he wants to do all these investigations, Kash Patel and different people. It's possible, but I'll believe it when I see it. Even if he wants to do it, yeah, he could be threatened. So I believe it when I see who the hell is going to investigate the FBI, which is nothing but an internal intelligence agency to keep the people in line. Who's going to investigate the CIA and the FBI for going after Trump when they're probably still going to go after him when, let's face it, some freaking clown from Ukraine supporting clown was caught on the fifth hole trying to ice Trump. They've made a couple swipes at him, in my opinion, and they may make more. They could have been just to scare him. I don't know. Well, one of them, I think, was definitely trying to get Trump, the guy on the roof. But at any rate, my point is he can be influenced. And you know how these people are. If they can't influence you, then perhaps they'll replace you with somebody that can be influenced, right? And let's not be naive here. Trump, he's getting his money from Musk. J.D. Vance is getting supported by Peter Thiel. So what you have is a different faction of the ruling elite in power, the kind of libertarian techies. That's all it is. Instead of the military industrial complex guys, maybe the head of Lockheed Martin or whatever being or Wall Street, that faction's a ruling elite. They're always going to eat. They're always going to get theirs. But now you got these libertarian / techies, the new faction of the ruling elite, kind of new money. And they're going to be pushing Trump for libertarian techie kind of stuff. That's what you're going to get. Again, neoliberalism is the power is concentrated in the hands of a fewer and fewer members of the ruling elite, right? Well, the power is not concentrated in Trump's hands. It's going to be concentrated in Musk and Thiel and those people. The difference is, I think Musk is going to be up front saying, do this, do that. Now we want to do this. Now we want to do that, right? And whereas Peter Thiel is probably the more dangerous one. He's probably the one that you're never going to hear anything about. Thiel, the old saying, the rattlesnake, you walk up on it. A rattlesnake doesn't rattle because it wants to bite you. It rattles because it doesn't want to. But don't you leave it the hell alone. It's an alarm system. Holy shit, a rattlesnake. I'm out of here, right? Musk, you can see who he is, where he is, what he's saying. We shall see what happens with it. Where's Peter Thiel? He's in the back there doing spooky things. So protecting spookery, maybe. He's going to be up to no good, but you won't be able to see it. And I always feel that's more dangerous. Anyway, so you've got an economic system that's in total decline, an economic model that basically guarantees total decline. And right now, what's happening during COVID, one of the things they were able to do is switch everybody to online. You got to be online all the time. Buy everything online. Do everything online, right? That means you're not going to the store. That means you close bricks and mortar retail establishment. Well, a lot of them are not needed. All you need is something online, a drop off or pickup spot for online. Whatever it is, hey, I got cable. That's okay. We'll handle it all online. Go pick up your box here. Go draft your cable box or remote. We'll have it overnighted to you. There's trucks going through the neighborhood dropping stuff off. That's what that's about. What about the store where actual people worked in? Oh, we're closing that. We don't need those bricks and mortar stores anymore. It's being handled by AI. Now, what about all those people that are out of work and they ain't happy and they're in the streets and they're voting for Trump or whatever the hell, Jill Stein or whatever the hell they're doing, but they're not supporting the ruling elite because it ain't nothing in it for them, right? WIIFM, what's in it for me? There's nothing in it for them. There's nothing in it for them. And that's what's happening. I think it was James Baldwin who said the worst thing a society can create is a man who has nothing left to lose. They've created an entire generation, the young people. Generations now of people who have nothing better to lose. People who are like, man, it's almost time for me to retire, but I would not be able to afford to retire anytime soon. Even long after I'm dead, I won't be able to afford to retire. Oh, God, what am I going to do? So you've got a generation of people at the bottom, the youngest, who have no hope because they're mired in debt and everything's too expensive. You got a generation in the middle who are horrified because they're staring retirement age and expectations in the face, but their economics say it ain't going to work. It won't match up for you. And then, of course, you've got the older people that are trying to figure out what the hell's wrong with everybody else. And they're still complaining about prices, but they're still complaining. Why won't these young people just go along with what's going on? Like we've been doing. And they're struggling too. They're still complaining. So you have generations of people who are consecutively worse off than the generation ahead of them. It ain't going to work out well. It ain't going to continue to support this crap. And it's starting to fall apart. And I think what we're going to see when Trump comes in, if Trump comes in, I think you're going to see with Trump less of a focus on European politics, right? One big thing about the neoliberals here, they have this ideology where that says we got to control your culture, your politics, all that kind of stuff, right? They're very hands-on. I think Trump's going to be much less. It's going to be like this. Here's what we're going to do, Europe. We're going to take your money. We want your money for weapons, and we want your money for energy or whatever the hell we can sell you. And we'll take your industry, of course, because screw you, right? Anything else, shove off. Not interested. We got things to do, places to go, people to meet. We don't want to deal with your culture. We don't want to change it. We don't want to not change it. Just leave us alone and give us your money. He's pure. Trump is much more pure. It's just, it is really the essence of neoliberalism. Give me your money. It's a big stick up for the working class. And Trump is pretty blunt in things he does. With Europe, give me your money. The Europeans are going to be like, well, we don't want to do this, that, or that. He's going to just give me your money and then move on and go on about your business. Don't like you, can't stand you. You don't like me, I don't like you. And they're running into, let me add this. I got to finish with this. Foreign policy. You know, the big one is Ukraine. The big one is Ukraine because the neoliberals threw everything into that, right? They threw everything into that. It was, this has to be won at all costs. And they got trapped in it. They were like, we're going to make this the Afghanistan of Russia. They'll be stuck in there. And now you're stuck in. Russia's winning. They ain't stuck. You're only stuck if there's no hope for victory. They have a plan for victory. And if they look at the thing, the results of the results on the ground say that they're steadily moving towards a victory, that they're going to win. And now you're in a situation where you're just trying to hold out because if they win, this whole neoliberal project to me struggles to survive in its current form. It really is the big one because it's built on domination. It's built on dominating other countries, being able to tell people what they got to do. You got to use dollars or else. You've got to do what we tell you or we'll sanction you. Because two things, the big part of it is, number one, the concept of using military power to get your way is kind of dead because you used military power and you didn't get your way. And the Russians now showed you we can militarily defeat you and stop you from getting your way. So you can't use military power, number one. Number two, economic sanctions. You use all the power of economic sanctions you had against Russia, and it worked about as well as military power. What we found out is that Russia has a Romulan cloaking device where your military and your economic attacks, you can't hit them. There's nothing you can do. You can't hit them. You've tried everything. Not that you might not do some damage. You know, their force fields may be down to 70%, but they ain't getting much lower than that. And in fact, economically, the Russians are doing better. So what has happened? You threw everything you had at them. And now the world's looking and they're like, well, the neoliberals threw everything they had at the Russians. How'd it work? It failed. Ain't nobody going to be scared of you anymore. So now when you go around the world, start bullying people. And what are you going to do? Well, I'll put it like this. Forget everybody else. What are you ever going to be able to threaten the Russians with it from now on? You threaten them with everything. You fired missiles at them. You have one country that is off limits, right? It's the bully in the schoolyard that goes around beating people up, taking their money, beating this guy. And he goes up to Garland and he says, Garland, I'm taking your money. And Garland says, oh, no, you can't have my money. Oh, yeah, well, if you don't, I'll beat you to a pulp. Okay, well, I'd like to really do this another way, but okay. And you and Garland get in a fight and you lose. When you come out on that lot, onto the schoolyard from then on, you're looking around for somebody to take their money and you look at Garland and Garland looks back and you're like, you look away real quick because you know you can't get your money from him because he'll fight you and you're not going to win. He'll fight you to a stalemate or he'll defeat you. But who wants to get in that, go through that? And then you look for the other kids and you know what's going to end up happening? You're going to say, I'm going to beat that kid up. And Garland's going to say, no, don't beat him up. He's my friend. He's under my protection. Russia's going to be able to do that. Let's face it. After this, Russia is now allies with North Korea. You attack North Korea, you're attacking Russia. And Russia's shown they got Oreshniks, they got hypersonic missiles. They got all kinds of things that I'm not saying they could or couldn't win the war, but they could knock the hell out of you in one day, and you don't have they have missiles, literally. They have missiles that your air defense cannot stop in any way. If they fire them at you, you're going to get hit. That is a losing proposition. That's 1-to-1. They don't have to fire a salvo of missiles. If you can't even detect a particular missile, much less stop it, they ain't got to fight a salvo. They can fire one, and it's going to hit its target. That's a problem. You can't push that guy around anymore. So militarily speaking, this whole regime change things, and might I add this, it was built on lies. Hey, we've got to stop Russia because they want to take over Europe. They want to reinstitute the Soviet Union. They want to do all these things. What happens now that you've lost the war to the Russians, pretty much? When you got to find a way out, and Trump, who is not dedicated to this particular Ukraine project at all, says, "Yeah, I'll take a deal." And I think, quiet as it's kept, I think the Russians would like to end this war. And if they can find a way to end the war in a way that works for them, I think they'll take it. Okay, so at that point, I mean, the Russians have won the war, and the idea that the U.S. dominates the world, it's over. So what are you going to go after China now? A bigger country with more, they may not have the military technology of Russia, but they've got good military technology and plenty of it. And you are weakened. You're weakened in fighting Russia. You're weakened in the Middle East. And now what you think you're going to go after China when you're at your weakest and getting weaker? And internally, both economically from the perspective of prosperity and politically it's unstable. The one party in the U.S. just got smashed, and the rest of its so-called allies are crumbling. Macron, Starmer, look what's happening in Romania. Look what's happening in Germany. Look what's happening in Georgia. You're losing all across the board. Internally, your politics are crumbling. The politics of neoliberalism are crumbling, and you're trying to replace them with other neoliberals. But the foundation of neoliberalism being censorship and military aggression, it won't work anymore, and you're going to be in trouble. Here's the thing about this neoliberal reckoning, this neoliberal collapse. If your propaganda machine is not healthy and dominant, nothing works. Because it only works. Your whole neoliberal model only works as long as the people go along with it. When they start shooting the CEOs of corporations because the corporations are screwing them over, your neoliberal model starts to fall apart. They're sharpening up the guillotines. So the propaganda machine is unraveling fast. After the Trump election, fast it's unraveling. And of course, your military machine is unraveling fast because basically the other countries are getting advanced hypersonic technology and other technologies, air defense technologies that you just don't have. Neoliberal industrial policy is making it too expensive to have a powerful military. Now you got a military that's just expensive. That's all it is. Now you can say our military has to be better than them. Why? Because we spend $900 billion a year and they only spend $100 billion. That's why it has to be better, not because our technology is better, not because we got more people that can't drag people into the military. And everybody in it wants to get out because they don't want to die. So we don't have a better industry. Nah. We don't have better technology. Nah. We don't have more people. No, we got nothing. The whole military thing, the propaganda is falling apart. The military power is falling apart. The ability to dominate economically is rapidly decreasing as I think, BRICS is about to add 9 more countries. Now, some of them may be considered observer nations. I don't really know what that means. But the bottom line is the fact that BRICS is going to add 9 more countries when they got 40 countries that want to join. And you know what? They probably got about 190 countries that want to join. Quiet as it's kept. Everybody wants to join BRICS. So the economic domination is coming to an end. And might I add, internally, the model doesn't work for the masses. If you got 90% of the people that the model doesn't work for. It only works for 10%, really, in the top 1% really well, but 90% it really doesn't work, and they're getting, crushed. Bad news. At that point, that model is not going to continue to exist, and the only thing it's going to create is anger and animosity and fights. And so we've got a holistic crash militarily. You lose the Ukraine is the big one. Middle East is important. It's critical. Don't get me wrong. But right now, the big one is Ukraine, because you have come up against a rival peer superpower. You got your ass kicked. And you lied to the American people. And you lied to the European people. And if there's a deal, they're going to say, well, you told me I had to sacrifice, because if I didn't, Putin was going to attack the rest of the countries and he wouldn't stop until he gets to the English Channel. And now you got a deal, and Putin says, all right, well, good enough. Let's chill. He don't want to attack nobody, just wants to lay low. And now there's going to be a reckoning there. They're going to say, you mean to tell me we're going through all this pain, all of the country, all this stuff, everything's going through the roof, and you lied the whole time? There will be a price to pay for that, particularly in Europe, but also here, particularly in Europe. Not as much here if there's some kind of a deal. We don't know if there will is, because there'll be an element here saying, we told you so. There'll be you can see Trump won big here, which basically, not to say good, bad, or indifferent about Trump, but it was obvious that a big part of it was the Ukraine. A lot of people were like, yeah, Trump said, I'm going to end the war in Ukraine. We're like, good, just as long as you do something about this economy, which he won't be able to, but that's something we want to end. And a lot of people were afraid of nuclear war. They're like, hey, we got to vote for Trump. Why? Because we got a little better chance, maybe not a great, but a better chance of not getting nuked. At least if he stops with Russia, there's some way where maybe we won't get nuked. Right? So bottom line is, what we're seeing here is the final days of this ideology, in my opinion. This is not, they're like the crash of the West, the crash of the U.S. empire. That's one way to put it. There's a lot of different ways to state it. Another way to state it is the collapse of the neoliberal economic model. Now, there are people that just say this is capitalism, and inevitably this is the collapse of capitalism. Could be however you choose to phrase it is fine with me. I'm just saying what we're seeing is an ideological collapse. And it's not an ideological collapse because of the workings of the ideology. It is an ideological collapse because collapse because of the inevitable outcome of the ideology, right? The inevitable. It's not that what you're doing in what neoliberalism does in and of itself is going to create a dynamic where it can't survive as it's going along. It's that the outcome that it produces is pain for the working class. The outcome it produces is the opposite of democracy. It produces a totalitarian government that has to more and more crack down on the people, shut their mouths, censor them, lock them up, do things to stop them from saying, hey, this doesn't work for us and we don't like it. We want something different. Inevitably, it has to clamp down and do more and more of that. And the more they squeeze, the more angrier the people get. And that's what we're dealing with now. It creates this outcome. And so now this outcome's happening rapid. What's interesting is that I'll finish by saying this. Everybody talks about whether or not Trump will get a deal. Let's just say he does. Don't know that he will. Won't that be interesting? The aftermath of the Ukraine conflict, the questions that will be asked in Europe about why everything's closed down and why we got deindustrialized, impoverished, the questions that will be asked in Europe about the Nord Stream blast. I mean, there's a lot of things going on. And if they open it back up, people can freely travel to Europe. To Russia, people can, let's say, listen to RT or Sputnik. Oh, no, not that, right? Things like that. People can hear other alternatives. Be crazy, wouldn't it? This would be crazy, man. In a way, I hope they get a deal in this, of course, to stop the death, and the killing and the misery, and to stop the potential for nuclear conflict, at least in that theater. But to see what the hell's going to happen afterwards, when people start saying, "Why the hell what did we go through this for again?" And let me tell you this, for those of you who think that if Trump makes it to the 20th, that the leaders in Europe are somehow going to be united against him, they're going to kiss his ass and they'll give him 10 hours to draw a crowd. They will do what they're told, I believe. All right, let's give it a shot. Let's see if we have any. I swear, I thought I saw. All right, let's go. Some super chats. Got to answer the super chats. Here we go. Let's start here. Laura, you have described philanthrocapitalism, rich people who convince you of the things against your own interests. RFK Jr. pegs Bill Gates as one. Thanks. Thank you. Laura G. Great comment. How about we say what Edwin Rodriguez says? Come on, Edwin Rodriguez. Hey, how about what's been done to Guatemala? Trauma to the people who then migrate here. That's the whole, guess what? Isn't that what happened in Europe? Isn't that why Europe's loaded with migrants, because they destabilize areas of Africa or in the Middle East, and those people end up. That's what happens with migration in the empire, in the colonialism. That's what migration is about. We destabilize these regions, and then these people show up at our door, and then we blame them. Oh my God, no, God, I can't believe they showed up here from Venezuela. What are you going to do? I suspect we should do more sanctions on Venezuela and impoverish the people so more of them will show up. Garland, thank you for your brilliant program and for your effort and time on each presentation. Thank you very much, JF. The people are more than kind here. A lot of great Christmas gifts, you might say. And more, I think that's it. Let's look on Rockfin. All right, somebody on Rockfin had something to say. James Boyajan says, thank you for your always devastating analysis of our corrupt, undemocratic, corporate-controlled regime. Hey, you hit the money. You hit the nail on the head there, buddy. Let's see. Let's go to maybe, just maybe, we got a Rumble rant. Let me see. Nope, no Rumble rants. Well, I wanted to thank everybody for hanging out with me for an hour on a Saturday. A couple of things. Please share this on all your social media platforms if you can afford it. PayPal or Buy Me a Coffee, Cash App. Patreon is always great, even if it's only for a couple bucks. You know, every little bit helps. So I really appreciate that. And share this on all your social media platforms. Follow me on Rockfin and Rumble, of course, also, just in case the unthinkable happens here on YouTube. And of course, share this on all your social media platforms. Thanks a lot, everybody. Peace. I'm out.